I kind of had this weird phenomenon. So one of our videos that's blowing up is like the billionaire one.
Yeah.
So I was like, while I was studying it, I was like, okay, what happened here?
This video sucked. I don't get it. Yeah.
That being said, it led me to actually watch the podcast we were talking about, like the Layla Hormozy and the billionaire one.
Yeah.
And so, usually when I watch podcasts, I like get it, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to aim for 10 million, right? Like be the person that's able to create that. But when I used to watch these podcasts, I didn't really like. I understood like this has a real impact and whatnot, the habits, the ideas, the frameworks and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the application never really felt real, right?
Yeah.
But then when I started working with you, when you like fully on board, when like I graduated from like the 2K with you to the 5K, right?
Yep.
And you started teaching me the frameworks in the beginning, right? Like the one you just mentioned, downtime, and also just because I'm now like Anthony immersed.
Yeah.
When I was listening to that podcast, I could feel the very real like it felt tangible, like the 10 million for the first time.
Yep.
Versus just mathematics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it felt like almost like there was like a transmutation from the billionaire to like your experiences, which came into me.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I was like, oh, I don't know. Have you ever gone? It seems like it feels like something that you probably get a lot through like your mentorships or something. Is that like a phenomenon?
Well, I think this is why having coaches and networks is like really important, is because it's one thing to sit and read the book or to listen to the podcast. Like it's one thing for somebody to, there's 700 episodes, right, of this podcast. Somebody could go listen to it. They can hear me say these things, but there's something very different between hearing me say it and then actually being next to me and seeing me do it and thinking like, okay, here's me actually applying this concept in real time. So there's that disconnect between the theory and the implementation. And I think that's the true value of a coach or the value of a community that's operating at that level, is you get insight into how people are actually implementing it. And something about that just makes it real. When you go, holy crap, like they actually are using this. This is how he's using it. Like, because a lot of times with like a podcast, it's very easy. Like we just laid out this framework of the wigs and the migs, right? And it's very easy to think of like, okay, I could see how you could do this process. But to see it in real time, where, okay, if you see me walk by somebody and ask them, hey, what's your wig this week? And they answer it and you go, cool, wow. Like that was literally like a 15-second interaction. Just, hey, what's your wig? This is my wig. Just seeing them be able to articulate it, you go, holy crap. They know what their wig is. And they obviously that's going to influence in how they move forward and do their work. So I think it's just seeing the actual implementation of the ideas. And so that's not just like this pie in the sky abstract concept, but actually seeing like, oh no, they actually do this. Like that was a big game changer for me. Like there's a lot, and honestly, here's the tricky bit, is that there's a lot of people out there putting out content saying shit that they don't actually do. And that it sounds really good, but then you get next to them and you're like, yeah, you're not actually doing this. Like that's not actually how you approach this problem. And so there's this what would you say, maybe a lack of authenticity then around the idea. The idea might be good, but if nobody's actually using it, then it's kind of like, what's the point of that? Yeah. Right? It's kind of like cold plunges. I think a lot of people like to talk about cold plunges, but how many people actually cold plunge every day? How many people who have talked about cold plunging actually cold plunge every single day for the last 5 years? It's like very, very few. Yeah. And so is cold plunging important? I don't know. Could it be beneficial? Probably. Is it the most important thing? Like probably not, because how many people are actually doing it consistently for long periods of time? I can name a handful of people, and they're very high achievers. And I look at them and I go, cool, he's actually living it and doing it. But most people aren't. And so I think that's why you have to be really careful about the information that you consume. But the best way is just to get around somebody and actually see it being played out. Like, oh, how do you think about this problem? Like, and most people don't get that access. Okay. Right? Like they're not going to just stumble into a room and have access to me. Yeah. Right? Like they're either going to pay or I'm going to be paying them. Right? Like those are really the two ways. Yeah, someone's getting paid one way or the other.
And then that brings me to the second point, which is like, There were so many similarities when I watched that podcast between like how that billionaire operates and how you operate.
Yeah.
Like ridiculous.
It's wild. It was wild. I was like, holy crap, this is like a brother from another mother. I pinged him right afterwards. I was like, hey man, I appreciate your worldview. Like it resonates a lot. And so we had a good conversation about it. And it was really funny because he articulated some things in exactly the same way I've articulated them too. And I was like, interesting. All right. He might be the Indian version of me.
No, that's exactly what I was thinking. But what else I realized was that it seems like there's a subset of like highly successful people, and they all seem to focus like, I mean, I consider you part of that group as far as I understand you,
Mm-hmm.
and as well as that guy, because I just went down a rabbit hole with him.
Yeah. He's good. Yeah. He's got good content.
Exactly. But it seems like there's a subset of a few things you guys do very like there's probably like 5.
Mm.
One of them is like, for example, you don't skip, you can't suck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was another one.
Yeah.
Another one is like, you always have to have a framework in threes typically.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Right? So, and a multiple.
Yep.
Of that, right? And that actually even translates to the YouTube title.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? And so, is there like a kind of like, do you have like, have you noticed like similarities between like you and your particular mentors, where it's like they have these same principles?
Yeah, I think it's the idea that history never repeats itself, but it always rhymes.
Oh.
Right? And it's the same with success. Success never repeats itself exactly the same, but it always rhymes. Like there's certain things that keep recurring over and over. And it's not because it's serendipity and it's luck. It's just like, oh, for whatever reason, that thing lends itself towards this thing. And so people who are successful, they all tend to look alike, or say to sound alike, start repeating the same things, because they might not say it exactly the same, but a lot of what they're saying rhymes, right? It's like, man, he sounds a lot like that guy, and that guy sounds like that. They all sound alike. And it's like, well, yeah, because what gets you to the top of the mountain, there's only so many paths. There's only so many different ways to get up there, right? And so all of it's going to revolve around, well, I took a step, and I took another step, and then I kind of pointed myself in the direction of the goal, and I kept going, and I didn't get discouraged when I got to the top of a ridge, and I realized I had to go back down and like turn back around, and I had to triangulate a strategy, and I had to have a plan. I had to kind of like figure out, okay, how do I know if I'm moving in the right direction, right? All of these things, like, you get to the top of the mountain eventually, and people are like, how'd you do it? And you're like, well, this is what I did. And they're like, well, that's what that guy said. And it's like, well, that's right, because there's only so many different ways to do it. Right? It's not exactly the same thing, but like history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And the same idea of like success doesn't happen in a vacuum, it leaves clues, right? And it just happens to be that there's only so many different ways to be successful, because like the majority of man's problems revolve around like the same 6 universal issues, like issues around, wanting love, wanting security, wanting safety, wanting respect, wanting like whatever. Like there's only so many like big existential problems humans all face. How it manifests on the individual level is all very unique. Like how you experience the problem of like love and respect and security and safe, all that stuff is very different than how it is for me, but we're still fighting the same battle. And so that's when it comes to marketing, one of the ways that you can tap into your messaging to make it resonate with people and to make it feel like you're speaking directly to them. Like this is what I did. This is what I do when I'm speaking on stage is I take a big concept that we all struggle with, and then I share my particular struggles with it. And in my sharing of this big problem we all have, people see themselves in me because they already resonated with the big problem. And so then they'll come up and they'll be like, oh my God, it was like you're speaking directly to me. That's what you want your marketing and your products to sound like, because you understand not their specific context, but you understand the big problem that they're facing. And so like the same concept with like successful people, they're all successful in the same ways. There's only so many different ways to be successful. It's like you have your health, you have your wealth, you have your mindset, you have like your relationships, right? There's only so many different ways we can quantify this, or like your spiritual health. So like there's only so many ways. And then it's a matter of, okay, well, you specifically on your journey within the context of that bigger frame, what did you do? And you just see like the same things repeated over and over and over. So we all sound alike at the end of the day.
That was mind-breaking.
Well, I mean, you could even go back to like the Bible, right? The Bible says like there is nothing new under the sun. And like people get hung up on this all the time. They're like, you're not saying anything new that hasn't been said before. It's like, no, the message is the same. The delivery is different. It's like how I deliver this message is different than how this person delivers. We have the same experiences. We went to the same place, but we're different people, and so we'll tell the message differently. And so the message isn't different; it's the delivery of the message. And you never know. Like, I think the value of it is that you never know whose delivery is going to get through at any given moment. Right? I could be listening to Tony Robbins for years, and his message just isn't getting through, and then I hear the same message delivered by Brandon Burchard. Pretty much the same exact message, just delivered slightly differently. And I go, holy crap, that hit me different. Changed my life. Right? And you just never know who's going to hear it and how your delivery is going to get through to them. And that's why I do the content in a lot of ways. It's like, I know that there's a version of me out there who needs to hear it in the way that only I can communicate it. And that might be the thing that changes everything for them.
What you did for me the other day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.